Welcome back. Nancy Pelosi's new comments that she does not support impeachment and that the president isn't worth impeaching comes as everyone waits for Robert Mueller's report, a report that a lot of Democrats believe could lay the groundwork for impeachment, a report that could be handed over to the Justice Department any day now, perhaps any moment now. We just don't know. As Politico reports, this week could reveal Mueller's endgame. There's going to be action in cases involving Roger Stone, Michael Flynn, Rick Gates, and Paul Manafort. And the White House this afternoon left the door open to the president going nuclear and pardoning Paul Manafort, just 2 days before we find out how long Manafort's going to spend in prison. With me now is John Brennan, former CIA director and NBC News senior national security and intelligence analyst, and Chuck Rosenberg, former U.S. attorney and a senior FBI official who worked closely with Robert Mueller. Same question to both of you, gentlemen, and it's going to be this. If Nancy Pelosi is saying impeachment isn't worth it, is she tamping down on expectations about the Mueller report? Could she know something that we don't know?
She could. I don't believe she does at this point. It's a bit surprising that she came out with this statement prior to any public awareness of the Mueller report's findings. But she did leave herself an out. It was caveated. She said, unless it's compelling, it's overwhelming and bipartisan. I think we already have 2 of those boxes checked. It's the bipartisan block that will not be checked, I think, from her estimation. And now it has set a fairly high political standard, which is not what the Constitution says, but yet I think it's the political realities of Washington that on the eve of a presidential election, she doesn't want to go through a bruising fight that's going to get through the House impeachment, but that his trial in the Senate will be not something that's going to end in conviction, given the Republicans' determination to stay with them through thick and thin.
So is she guessing that whatever Mueller comes out with, whatever the results of this investigation are, that it's not going to be enough to convince Republicans, so let's move on from this?
Yeah, I think the key criterion that she has established is bipartisan. I think it has to be something that is going to be enough to convince the Republicans who have just stuck with Trump to date to say, no, this does meet the standards of high crimes and misdemeanors, and he needs to be ousted from office. So I think we still have to wait to see what comes out from the Mueller report. But at this point, she is tamping down expectations so that the House Democrats, I think, can focus on their investigations.
Chuck Rosenberg, what do you think?
Well, I think John's right. Nancy Pelosi is a gifted politician who's making a political calculation. I don't think there's any chance that she could know what's in Bob Mueller's report. Remember, Mueller's report, by regulation, and Mueller is a regulation guy, Katie, has to be confidential when he transmits it to the Attorney General. Mueller has not leaked a thing. He's running an airtight investigation. And so the notion that Nancy Pelosi knows what's in it seems to me to be quite fanciful.
Has the president successfully raised the bar so high on impeachment, raised the bar so high on what Robert Mueller can find that would equal bad for him, equal a crime, like getting on the phone with Vladimir Putin and saying, please help me get these emails out to take out Hillary Clinton, that he's basically dragged the Democrats along and made the bar for impeachment now impossibly high?
Well, I think since he has acted so abnormally, and this is such an abnormal administration, I think he has convinced a lot of people in Washington that anything he does not reach that bar of impeachment.
It's kind of gaslighting.
It is. And I think he's been very intentional about that. And he's masterful from the standpoint of manipulating the perceptions of people, particularly his base, to just turn a blind eye and to hold their nose on some of the things that are not all that consistent with a president's, comportment. And that's why I think so many people are just determined to stick with him. Again, sometimes it's the end justifies the means.
He's lowered the bar and raised the bar at the same exact time.
Exactly.
Adam Schiff was on Meet the Press yesterday, Chuck, and he sounded worried. He was saying that Robert Mueller should have President Trump in front of him, that he should question him in person. Let's listen to Adam Schiff on Meet.
I do think ultimately it's a mistake because probably the best way to get the truth would be to put the president under oath, because as he's made plain in the past, he feels it's perfectly fine to lie to the public.
Chuck, what do you think?
Yeah, in a typical investigation, Katie, you do 2 things. You save the most important people for last, and you talk to everybody, assuming that they'll talk to you. And so it's always struck me as almost a necessity that Bob Mueller and his team talk to Donald Trump, except for one thing. And this is a problem that Adam Schiff has, too. We don't know the facts. We don't know what Mueller knows. We don't know what he needs. And we frankly don't know whether or not the president has agreed or not agreed to be interviewed, and whether that would sort of engender some sort of legal fight. By the way, I think it's a legal fight Bob Mueller would win. I imagine if it made it to the Supreme Court would require a president to give evidence, assuming he didn't have a Fifth Amendment privilege, in an ongoing criminal investigation. But I work for Bob Mueller. I trust his judgment. And if he doesn't think that he needs to talk to Donald Trump, then I'm sure he has a very good reason for that.
In considering the Mueller investigation and considering what may be there or may not be there, if there is a real threat to our sovereignty and our democracy from the President of the United States, if they found something real there, how long can you sit on that, prudently sit on that?
Well, I guess it depends on the facts. If it's something from the past that has been uncovered that does compromise the national security of this country, I think it's a valid question. Should we allow an individual to remain in the Oval Office who is compromisable? And so I agree with Chuck. We don't know how much of this investigation iceberg is above the water. I know that there's a fair amount below the water. How much is there and what is there, I think, is going to be determined by what is going to be presented to the Attorney General. For all we know, the report could have been shared with the Attorney General last week, unless Chuck, corrects me on this issue. There's nothing that requires a public statement to go out from the special counsel's team saying that we have delivered the report to the Attorney General. And I think Bob is going to give William Barr the opportunity to review this so he can make the decision about what goes forward.
Chuck, you'll be the expert on this, but I think we were told we'd get some guidance from DOJ when the report was handed over. We just wouldn't have any idea what was in the report immediately.
No, but I think John's instincts on this one are right, and here's why. The regulations require that the Mueller report to the Attorney General be confidential. It is certainly not in the Attorney General's interest for anyone to know that he has received it, because the second we know he's received it, we start hammering on him for what he's going to do and when he's going to make it public and what he's going to transmit to the Congress. And so, sure, entirely plausible, I don't know, but entirely plausible that Mueller has transmitted it. If he hasn't, then when he does, I imagine they're not going to announce that. I don't see how that helps the Attorney General, who would certainly want time to read it and reflect on it and to determine what, if anything, could be properly transmitted to the Congress and made public. Remember, the Attorney General's marching orders from the regulations that govern this report are that his report to Congress must be brief, and Mueller's report to him must be confidential.
So you talked about the iceberg and what we know is above the water and what is below the water. What is above the water right now is all the action we're going to be seeing in court this week from various people involved in the Mueller investigation. One of those people, Chuck, is Paul Manafort, who will get sentenced for the second time in as many weeks on conspiracy to defraud the United States. This could determine how long he does end up staying in prison, or it will determine that. Today, the White House would not explicitly rule out that Paul Manafort would not be given a pardon.
Right. Well, Paul Manafort should not be dancing in the end zone just yet, Katie. He got a lenient sentence in Virginia. He's looking at an additional 10 years in the District of Columbia. The judge there could run it consecutively, meaning in addition to the time he got in Virginia. So he still has significant exposure. Whether or not the president decides to pardon him is something beyond the power of all the prosecutors and all of the judges involved in this matter. But he should not be dancing in the end zone yet.
What do you think, John?
Personally, I don't have any doubt that Mr. Trump is going to pardon Paul Manafort at some point. The question is when. But then if he's also convicted of state charges, Donald Trump is not going to be able to pardon him for that. So I do believe that Paul Manafort will be able to get out of the federal charges, because what does Donald Trump have to lose if he pardons him?
That's a significant statement.
Yeah,
that you have no doubt that he's going to pardon him.
I think it's, whether or not it's when he's leaving office, whatever, but this is a person that he's spoken very highly of and says he's a good man. He feels as though this whole investigation has been a lark and has been a witch hunt. And so why would Donald Trump allow him to stay in jail if those were his views?
What about Mike Flynn? Is he going to get a pardon as well?
Anything is possible with Donald Trump. I think he uses these powers as he wants to and as he believes it's going to help him personally. So again, if there are state charges brought against Paul Manafort, that is going to stick, as well as against other individuals. But federal charges and convictions and sentences, I think Donald Trump is ultimately going to pardon them.
Director Brennan, thank you very much for being here. Chuck Rosenberg, thank you as well.
Hello, YouTubers. If you're watching this, it means you've checked out our channel, so thank you. Now do me a favor, subscribe by clicking on that button down there. Click on any of the videos to watch the latest interviews and highlights from MTP Daily and MSNBC. You can get more Meet the Press content every morning in the First Read newsletter. If you're tired of content that you don't know anything about where it came from, you don't have to have that problem with us. NBC News, MSNBC, MTP, and the Meet the Press mindset right here for you on YouTube. Subscribe now.